Hi, I'm Helen. Thanks for joining me today. We're going to be painting a really nice summer landscape with maybe a mountain in the distance and a lake with some lovely reflections with blues and greens in the foreground. The first thing I'm doing is covering the entire canvas with a very thin titanium white paint. If you have some retarder or slow dry medium, you can add a few drops to the paint as well, which will just help it stay wetter for longer on the canvas. This means that we can blend our colours straight onto the canvas and it'll give us a nice soft effect. And because there's already white paint on the canvas, I'm going to come straight in with phthalo blue. I'm using a large brush and just with a crisscross motion I'm working my way down the canvas. As there's already white paint on the canvas, as I'm moving downwards it's naturally going to get lighter. And then you can use the back of the brush just to smooth out all of those lines. I'm barely touching the canvas, I'm just very lightly gliding the brush over the top and smoothing out any lines. If you have a soft fluffy brush you can use this as well, it would be a little easier with that. Just keep going until you get a nice smooth effect that you're happy with. Now we can come in with some white paint. I'm using the same brush, I've wiped it off a little bit to get rid of the excess blue, and all we're going to do is just dab that paint onto the canvas and really just try to make up a little bit of a cloud shape. Then I'm going to come in with my light fluffy brush, any dry fluffy brush will do, and with a circular motion I'm going at the bottom of the cloud and gently blending it into the blue. Just round and round, a few flicks here and there, we'll fluff it up a little bit at the top and soften it all, and that's it. It's just a really simple little white cloud. When you finish the first one, that's when you can think about adding a few others. So we'll do them one at a time. I'm coming in again with the white paint. I'm really just dabbing it on the canvas, roughly where I think the tops of the clouds are going to be. Just dabbing it on. And then again, coming in with the little fluffy brush and using that circular motion again to soft and blend the bottom of the cloud. And a few little flicks, soften and fluff up the tops. And that's the second cloud done. I think we'll put in another one on the left, or maybe have one more, so we're just doing exactly the same thing again. It doesn't matter if there are a few spots that are a brighter white than others, that'll look quite nice when you fluff it all up. And we'll just go round and round again, softening and working it into the blue. And a few little flakes, fluff it up at the top. And that's a really simple, fluffy white cloud sky. We'll give that brush a wash, dry it off a little. And then the next thing I'm going to do is take my palette knife and we'll make up sort of a dark bluey grey colour for the base of our mountain. So I've got my phthalo blue again, I'm going to add some black, I'm going to add a little bit of white too because this mountain's going to be in the distance, so I don't want it to be too strong a colour, I want it just a little bit paler so it falls back into the distance. And we'll just mix that together, wipe the palette knife off. We can add, I'm going to add the tiniest bit of cadmium red and that will give it a sort of a purple smoky grey colour. It will just knock back that blue a little bit. And then all we have to do is using our palette knife, mark out where we'd like the mountain to be. So I'm using the edge of the palette knife, blocking out the shape of the mountain. You can always change it, don't worry if you're not happy with the shape, you can come back in, you can adjust the angles, you can add a few little ridges here and there. Just block it in. I'm using the point of the palette knife as well to get those nice little points and angles on the mountain. I think we'll put a few in the distance, maybe a couple just right in the distance, fading back. Scrape all of that paint into the canvas. Put a few, a little bit on this side. Using the edge of the palette knife again. There we go, scrape all that colour in. A little bit at this side. And you can play around with it for as long as you like until you get something that you're happy with. Just adding a little bit here and there. Take your time. We'll just get it looking exactly how we want it. Work it all into the canvas. And now I'm just going to come in with a flat brush and smooth all of that paint out, taking the excess paint off the canvas, sweeping downwards and blending and softening it at the bottom of the mountain. Just smoothing it down. If there's a little too much paint on the brush, you can just dab it off on a piece of paper towel or an old cloth. You can correct any areas if you need to. And you can also kind of work out where the ridges are going to be on the mountains, where the angles are going to be, which side the light's going to be on and which side the shadow's going to be on. So because the paint's nice and wet, you can play around with it for a little while and just figure out where you're going to put the light and the shade and where the angles are going to be. Smoothing it down. And all I'm really trying to do is get rid of any excess paint, soften and blend it, so it's going to be a lot lighter at the bottom. And while the paint's still wet, while the white paint's still wet, I'll take some phthalo blue and we'll start marking in a little bit of the water in the lake. And for that I've got my flat brush again, and I'm keeping the lines nice and horizontal, sweeping it from the left hand side of the canvas and the right hand side of the canvas, so there'll be a lighter patch in the middle when I'm finished. Just keep the lines as straight and level as possible. If there are any areas that are a little bit heavy and you want to blend them out, you can just blend it out and then keep it nice and flat again. And then we'll soften that in the middle. We'll give our brush a rinse again. And then we can come in. I'm going to take some white onto my palette knife and I'm going to add just the tiniest amount of blue to it. And that's really just so it's not bright white, it's got a little bit of blue in. Let's mix that together a little. And then using the side of the palette knife, we can just start adding that snow and light area where the sun's hitting the side of the mountain. I'm barely touching the canvas. I'm really just gliding the palette knife over the top, really, barely touching it. And then just pulling it downwards. And I'm pulling it in the direction of the angle of the mountain. So I'm pulling it down, which is the angle that the mountain will be on that side. And because the paint's a little bit drier underneath, that's when I'm getting all those really nice dark bits showing through. Just sweeping it down. Probably less is more. You can always build it up by adding more paint, but it's really difficult to take the paint off. So slowly build it up little by little. Let's add a bit here. And again, we can come back and change some of these, add a little more, change the angles a little if we need to. I'm just slowly building it up, adding that white paint. I'm using the point of the palette knife on some areas to get the really white highlights. Following that line down. Just sweeping it down. Put a little bright part on this side. I think we'll change the shape of this bit a little. Add a little white. Get some bright spots. Then we can make it a slightly darker colour just by adding a little bit more of that grey that we used for the mountain. And we'll use this paint to paint the shadow side of the mountain. A little more blue. This is just phthalo blue again. We'll put the shadows just down this side, and again we're going to follow the angle and direction of the mountain. Leaving those little holes and just ever so gently gliding the palette knife over the top of the canvas. I'm barely touching it. I'm just putting a little paint at a time on the palette knife. Not too much. Don't worry if you go over the white, we'll come back in and we'll add those white spots again if we need to. You've got plenty of time to play around with it and alter it. such an easy way to paint a mountain. Let's take a little bit of this darker colour, and I think we'll put some of this on the shaded side of the mountain too. I've only got a tiny bit on the palette knife because I don't want to add too much, just a few little spots here and there. Barely touching the canvas, just scraping it down the side. Just put it where you think will look good. Maybe a little bit down here. That way. If it's a little heavy, just scrape a little bit off. You can easily lighten it. Down that edge. Just a tiny bit. There. Wipe off that palette knife, and I think we'll come back in with the white and refresh those areas to make them extra sparkly white, and just in case we've gone over them when we were painting the other side. Right on the edge. Make them really pop. Just finishing touches, really. And then I've got sort of a coarse oval shaped brush. Any brush would do, nice and dry. Keep wiping off the excess paint, and we'll blend it and soften all the paint in at the bottom of the mountain. And that'll make it look like it's nice and misty at the bottom of the mountain. Take off that excess paint as you go, so you're not spreading the blue around too much. Soften it all out, blend it out. We'll rinse that brush off. Always rinse your brushes after you're finished. It's sometimes tempting just to put them down for a minute, but acrylic paint is brutal on brushes if it's left to dry. Just give it a quick rinse. I'm going to make up a darker grey colour now, so it's exactly the same colours that I used before, with a little bit of the cadmium red added to make it more of a purpley grey colour. I'm using a fan brush, but you can use a filbert brush or whatever you have, and we'll start marking in a few hills and a little bit of land in the foreground or middle ground. Just using that dark blue colour because this side will be in the shade, so we want it a little bit cooler. And it is really just a rough shape at this stage, not worried about any detail, just blocking out a shape. There we go. And with my flat brush, I'll use the same colour and we'll add in some reflections while we're here. So straight down. Pull it straight down, keep it as straight as you can. And then all we have to do is soften it again. If you've got a dry fluffy brush, you can use this. If you're like me and your paint's dried a little bit by now, you can come in with a flat brush. Use the edge of the brush and just blend it a little, soften it a little. And we'll add those water reflections. That easy. Rinse the brush again. Now I'm going to add some sap green to it to give us a really nice dark green colour. And we will put in some land on the left hand side. Really just need to decide where you think it'll look good. You can put it wherever you like. Sweep it down. Again, I'm using a fan brush, but you can use whatever brush, filbert, whatever brush you have. Let's just block it in. It's a really nice green colour. I think we'll bring it round. Down a little, maybe curve it round a little. Give that brush a rinse and then we'll come back in with our flat brush again. And we'll put in some green reflections on this side. Straight down again. There we go. Got my fluffy brush, I'll just dry it off a little bit, make sure it's nice and dry. Smooth that out. All right, I think in the distance, we'll tidy this up a little bit. So I've just got a small round brush and I'm just going to tidy it up. Smooth any areas out. Make a light green colour by adding some of the blue we used for the mountainside. A little bit of that green. We'll make it nice and pale. We'll put a few little, I guess, fir trees or an indication of trees just in the background, in the distance. And they're really just lines. Put them wherever you feel looks good. Don't worry too much about it. It's just to give a little indication of trees. The bottom of the valley in the mist. They really make that mountain look huge, don't they? brush off. And now I've got a very small fan brush. I love using this for small little fir trees. I've got my dark green again, and I'm using the side of the fan brush for the point, and then just the corner of the fan brush to start the top of the fir tree, going from side to side and gradually getting bigger as we move down the tree. Try and keep it a little darker in the middle of the tree where the trunk will be. And we'll just block out a rough shape of our fir tree. There we go. Just make that a little bit darker in the middle. Alright, let's put in a second one. Same thing, just a point at the top and then using the corner of the brush at the top part, side to side, and getting wider as we come to the bottom of the tree. We'll put in a few shadows at the bottom too. I think just a little third one right at the end. Stick one in there too, I think. Maybe one behind. There. Let's put a bigger one in here. Make it nice and dark. Get plenty of paint on the brush. Let's put a big one or a bigger one up here. We can play around with these afterwards if we need to and adjust the shape a little bit. Or won't need too much doing to it because this brush does a good job of making a fir tree. We'll just see how we go. So don't worry if it doesn't look exactly how you want it. You can play around with it for a little while and improve the shape. Nice and dark at the bottom. Alright, we'll rinse our brush again. Dry it off on a little piece of paper towel. And let's take some of that lighter colour. Maybe we'll add a little red. A little cadmium red. So it's sort of more of a grey-green colour. And we'll pop in the edge of the land just as it meets the lake. Not much, just a tiny bit. Another rinse of the brush. Take some of that red. Because we've added that to the blue colour we already had, we can add some yellow ochre as well. That's going to give us sort of a really nice warm light. We'll add a little blue just to knock it back, a little black. So we end up with a browny grey. Darken that a little bit too. And with the dark colour first, let's add a little bit of interest. Some rocky parts maybe coming down this hill on the left. Just got the paint on the edge of the palette knife and I'm just pulling it down that hill. A little bit at the bottom to show the edge of the ground as it hits the water. Be just a few little rocky pieces sticking out of the grass. Wipe off the palette knife and then we'll come in with a lighter, warmer colour and we'll add a few little highlights on the top, just where the sun and the light is hitting them on the side. We can use our fan brush again. Let's make a lighter green by adding some cadmium yellow to it. I haven't mixed the paint fully, so there's still different colours on the brush. There's the dark green and the cadmium yellow. And we'll start dropping in a few areas of grass. Just dabbing it on. Leave some of the dark green showing underneath. This is really just the lighter, nice green, bright grass area on the top. And we'll leave the dark green for the shadows. I've added a little bit of yellow ochre to it here and there as well, to give us a nice range of colours. Of course, if you painted on a bigger canvas, a regular sized fan brush will be absolutely fine. That would be perfect. I'm only using the small one because I am painting on a small canvas today. It's just an 8 by 10 inch canvas. So we can keep building that up. You can add a little more yellow in some places, a little more yellow ochre in others. A nice range of colours and greens. If you don't have a fan brush, you could use a filbert brush, that would work well too, or even a flat brush if you just move it around up and down. Try and get the angles on the land and give it a bit of interest. And you can always go back over with the dark green if you don't like what you've done with the light green. A little bit more down by the water. And then we will pull down the reflections in the water again. I'm just using the little fan brush this time, but you could use a flat brush if you have one, or as long as you keep those lines nice and straight and pull them down. And then across we go. Again, I'm barely touching the canvas, just really lightly blending it out. I'm using the fan brush. You can use a fluffy brush, whatever you feel most comfortable with. And we'll rinse that brush. Right. We'll make our nice dark green again with our phthalo blue, some black, a little bit of sap green. Gives us a nice dark pine green colour. I've got my fan brush again. Put a bigger fir tree on this side. Same technique as before, point at the top, just using the corner of the fan brush first, slowly using more of the brush as we move down the tree. You could probably use a bigger brush for this tree because it is a little bit larger than the small ones in the background. There we go. And we can put another one here. You can put your trees wherever you like. Maybe there's a part of the mountain you're not too happy with and you'd like to cover it. Always just put a tree in front of it. If it's going to look okay, put a tree in front of it. Nobody will know. Let's put another one in. Give that brush a bit of a rinse. And because I want the two of the fir trees to be behind the hill, we'll bring that bright yellow, that light green in over the top to push the trees back a little. There we go. Another rinse. Just with the fan brush you can add a few extra little reflections. Just needs to be an indication really. Doesn't need any detail. There we are. Blue one on this side. There we go. Rinse our brush again. Let's put a little bit of nice sparkling water on the top. I'm just using my palette knife again. And the edge of the palette knife will just put a few little lines where the land meets the water. Add a few little light patches. There we go. You can put them wherever you like, wherever you think they're going to look good. It's easy to get carried away and put too many in, so Just think about it as you're putting them in. It's quite fun to do this. Sort of scrape the knife down with that last little bit of white on my brush to give those sparkles. It makes it look like the sun's hitting the water. That's nice. We'll make a dark brown by adding a little bit of cadmium red and some yellow ochre to our dark green. Let's just put a few lines at the bottom of that piece of land to the left. I'm sort of scraping it upwards as well to get a nice little effect as if it's going up the hill. There we are. Next step is to add a few highlights on the trees. A little bit flat and all one dark colour, so we'll put a few highlights where the sun's going to hit the side of our fir trees. Same technique as before, just using the side of our fan brush keep some of the dark colour underneath showing. Just work your way down the tree. It'll be darker at the bottom where the shadows are and a little bit lighter at the top where the sun hits the tips of the trees. Put a little bit on this side, not as much. It'll probably just be the tips of the tree in the sun, not the whole tree. If we add a little bit of white to it, we get an even lighter green. And we'll use this just to do the very, very tips, that light highlight. If the fan brush isn't working too well for you, just use a small round brush instead. We'll give that brush a rinse. We've got our brown. Let's just give a little bit of an indication of a tree trunk peeping out here and there. Any finishing touches that you think it might need. Sometimes these little highlights at the end make all the difference. A little rinse of the brush. See if we can add a few more sparkles to that water. On a nice sunny day, we're going to get a lot of bright sparkles on the water. Thanks for painting with me today. If you've enjoyed the video, don't forget to hit that like button for me, especially if you like the longer form tutorials, and I'll see you next time.